Hi class, this is the pre-recorded discussion for Module 5 Part 2. So in this discussion, we will be covering the remaining topics for Module 5, which are the following. Number 1 is the benefit cost ratio, profitability index, and lastly, the break-even analysis. So to start off, what is benefit cost ratio and profitability index? So basically, when it comes to business, you always have to compute what are the benefits and costs associated with every investment. Therefore, by that way, it should be very clear that for a business to be acceptable or any investment to be acceptable, your benefit should outweigh your cost. So it is commonly used to evaluate public projects. Several facets unique to public project analysis are neatly addressed by benefit cost analysis. Also, it is an important feature of the economic analysis period, which would tend to give us three goals. Number one is first, maximize the benefits for any given sets of cost or budget. Number two, maximize the net benefits when both benefits and cost vary, and minimize cost in order to achieve any given level of benefits. This is what we call as cost effectiveness analysis. So benefits, by definition, it is something that is advantageous and good. The classification of benefits are two. Number one is what we call as the primary benefits. It is a benefit directly attributable to the project. No? Say for example, if you're tollways, you collect toll. So those toll is what we call as the primary benefit. The secondary benefit is a benefit not directly attributable to the project. So if the primary benefits alone are sufficient to justify your project's cost, the secondary benefits need not to be quantified. Next is what's cost. Cost, it is the price or required amount before it can be acquired. So what are the steps in cost benefit analysis? Number one is first off, we need to identify the benefits. So with that, we need to calculate all benefits in monetary value. So when it comes to benefits, dili ta mo specifying 30 minutes time and etc. So it should be quantified into monetary values. Calculate all these benefits in monetary values. Calculate the net benefit wherein your benefit minus this benefit. And then step 2, identify your costs. So when it comes to cost, determine the non-recurring costs such as the first time investment and the salvage value at the end of the project period. Number 2, determine the recurring costs such as operating and maintenance, renovations, and etc. Then determine the annual revenues generated from the project. Calculate the net annual cost. So recurring plus non-recurring minus revenues or fees charged minus salvage value. Okay. Therefore, we'll go to step 3. Step 3 is performing the benefit cost analysis. Determine the interest rate to be used in the benefit cost analysis. Number 2, determine the equivalent net benefits. Determine the equivalent cost. Calculate the benefit cost ratio. So by calculation of the benefit cost ratio, we hereby come up with the formula. That is your B is equal to the summation of Bn 1 plus I to the exponent of negative n. Why is it negative n? Because basically, when it comes to getting your benefit, it is getting the present value of all the benefits. No? Therefore, this is just B of n divided by 1 plus I to the exponent of n actually. So this is the present value of all of your benefits. Same applies with your cost. So we need to get all of the present worth of all the benefits and cost. So therefore, Bn is benefits at the end of period n, and CN is expenses or cost at the end of period N. Therefore, N is your project life. I is the interest rate. So formula for the benefit cost ratio. Number one, you need to get your I. I is associated with the cost. Okay. Number two, the C hat. C hat refers to the K plus 1, wherein your C is equal to I plus C hat. I is your capital investment or the non-recurring cost. Your C hat is your maintenance, operating supplies that refers to your recurring cost. Therefore, during the first period's case, so normally cost accrual start after 1 year after the K periods of investment. So, ngayon ganitag K plus 1, this is mga recurring cost na. No? So the BC ratio is defined as by the formula. So BC at a certain interest rate is equal to B divided by C, such that C is equal to I plus C hat, where C is equal to I plus C hat should be greater than 0 for your answer not to be in infinity. So since B and C is the present worth, therefore, ang imong definition is that B over 1 plus C hat greater than 1, B is greater than I plus, and then B minus 1 plus C hat is greater than 0. So basically, your present worth of uncertain interest is that your B minus C should be greater than 0. No? That defines that your benefit outweighs your cost. So say for example, this is a sample problem. A public project being considered by a local government has the following estimated benefit cost profile. Number one, assume that your interest rate is 10%, your N is equal to 5 years, and K is equal to 1. That refers that your cash out for the first year is the investment cost or the non-recurring cost. So compute for B, C, I, and C hat, and the BC or the benefit cost ratio at an interest rate of 10%. There are your formulas. So therefore, knowing that your benefit is $20, 30, 30, and 20, starting from the second year, your CN is equal to 10, 10, 5, 5, 8, and $8, starting from year 0 up to year 5. And then your AN is equal to negative 10, negative 10, 15, 25, 22, and $12. So let's define our cash flow. So we very well know that it is very crucial to identify our cash flows. So the benefits is all of the cash flows going up, and the costs are all of the cash flows going down. Okay. So with that, your investment cost is equal to the first or the year 0 plus the year 1. That is your investment cost, or in other terms, we refer it as CN. Your BN naman is that your all of the benefits, and then your recurring costs are CN. Still, that's cost, no? So those are recurring costs and investment. Next, we'll proceed to the benefit. If you try to calculate the present value of all of the benefits is equivalent to $71.98. So you can pause this video and try to compute the present value of all the cash flows. Next, after computing your benefit, we will be able to compute our cost. But since we need to quantify our cost into two options, so basically your C you are computing the present value of all the cash flows in your C, or the benefit cost. Therefore, the total cost would be equivalent to $37.41. You can actually recompute, or you can pause this video to check whether the solutions are correct. So with that, your I is equal to the $10, or this value. This is your I. That is the summation of your $10 plus the $10 on the first year. Therefore, your I is equal to 19.09. And then your C hat refers to the recurring cost, which is equivalent to $18.32. Therefore, you can be able to compute your C, I, and C hat. With that, we can already compute for our BC ratio, no, or our benefit cost ratio. So B is 71.98, C is 37.41. And therefore, since BC means is greater than 1, therefore, it means that the user benefits exceeds your cost. So that is 71.98 divided by the C at 37.41. I'll get my calculator. So the BC cost ratio, BC ratio at the 10% interest rate is equal to 1.9. That refers to that your benefit is almost times 2 than your cost. So now let's proceed to incremental benefit, cost benefit analysis. So naamang good side times na there are certain times that wherein you have to choose a project out of many alternatives. So by this way, you will be choosing the best BC analysis, no, from multiple exclusive projects. So there are 5 steps actually in doing this one. Number 1, eliminate any alternatives with the BC ratio of less than 1. Number 2, arrange the remaining alternatives in increasing order of the denominator. So therefore, your I plus C hat, i-arrange mo siya in an increasing order. So alternative with the smallest denominator should be first, and the alternative with the second smallest should be second, and so on and so forth. So therefore, after that one, you can compute for the incremental differences for each terms. So that is B, I, C, and C hat. So for the paired alternatives, J and K in the list, so imo siyang i-pair by tapad or by partner. So steps 4 and 5, compute for the BC on uncertain interest rate based on incremental. So investments by evaluating that BCI is equal to change in B minus over change in I plus change in C. Therefore, compare the selected alternative with the next one on the list, repeating steps 1 to 4. So we modify the conditions when the following are met. Number 1, if AI and AC hat is equal to 0, this means that both alternatives require the same investment. No? So in this case, we choose the alternative with the greater B, okay, assuming the investment is the same. So therefore, the benefit with the alternative with the higher benefit should be chosen. In situations where projects with unequal service lives are to be compared, but the alternatives can be repeated, we may compute all components, values B, I, and C hat on an annual basis, basing them on incremental analysis. So, therefore, if BCKJ minus 1 is greater than 1, select the case alternative. But if BCI K minus J is less than 1, choose the J alternative. So let's proceed to the computation. Example, you have 3 alternatives. So A1, A2, and A3. So each project has the same service life, and the project present worth of each alternative is valued, are provided. So if all projects are independent, which project would you select? based on the BC ratio. If the three projects are mutually exclusive, which would be the best alternative? So already in this type of problems, you are already provided with the B, the I, and the C hat. So if you look at the one, if you look at it, kung magtanaw ka sa present worth of all of the alternatives, basically A2 will give you a 2 ka, or that is your decision nga naman, because it will give you the present worth na pinakadako. Okay? That's present worth. Now, since you are still undecided whether or not what to choose in the alternatives, you can be able to compute for the incremental analysis. So basically, you can compute for the benefit cost ratio for each. No? So example, ana niya, kaning si A1, it has a BC ratio of 1.33. It has a BC, si A2 has a ratio of 1.25. A3 has a BC ratio of 1.40. So daghan magutag basic decisions and decision making. No? Pwede ta mag-decide on the present worth, pwede ta mag-decide on the future worth, and pwede ta mag-decide on the BC ratio. If you look at the present worth, the value nga imong i-decide would be the A2 because its present worth is the highest compared to the other alternatives. But if you look at it on the BC ratio rasan individually, ang imo sang decision si A3 because siya say pinakadako og BC ratio. So under the PW criterion, A2 would be selected, and under the BC analysis, A3 is the best, while A2 is the least desired alternative. With that, let's try to compute on the kanang alternatives. No? So, mag-incremental analysis na. Number 1, eliminate alternatives with a BC ratio of less than 1. So, since no alternatives has a BC ratio of less than 1, no elimination was done. Number 2, rank the I plus C hat in increasing order. So, ako siyang i-assign. So, A1, A3, dayon A2. Ako siyang i-arrange increasing order. And then, ranking base, kana siya. Next is compute for the incremental differences. So kung maingon tag incremental differences, based on our formula, we should compute first based on the unsa man. So ang atong unang i-partner is A3 minus A1. No? So A3 minus A1. So that is A3 on ang K minus J. So A3 that is 21,000 since B over C man siya. 21 minus 12 over 15,000 minus 9. Therefore, ang iyahang BC ratio is 1.50. What does that mean? This means that the BC ratio is positive man if it's greater than 1. Therefore, A3 is better than A1. Next. So, since you're able to decide that A3 is better than A1, we can now conform or we can now compare A2 and A3. So with that, we can get the BC ratio on incremental of A2 minus A3. So A2 minus A3 now. So that is 35 minus 21 divided by 28 minus $15,000. Also comes with that one, it will give you an incremental cost or incremental BC ratio of 1.07. Therefore, ang pasabot ana niya, your A2 is greater than your A3. So therefore, A2 is a better choice. So with no further alternatives, A2 is the best choice or alternative for this problem. Next, let's discuss on profitability index. So with profitability index, actually it is more like the same of the benefit cost ratio, but it has its differences. So profitability index, it is another method similar to the benefit cost analysis. No? This index attempts to identify the relationship between cost and benefits of a proposal project through a use of a ratio. And by definition, profitability index or PI at a certain interest rate considers only initial capital expenditure as cash outlay and the annual net benefits are used. So by that way, we can be able to identify that the PI or the profitability index at a certain interest rate is equal to B minus C hat or the recurring cost over I. And then therefore, your I should be greater than 0. There is no such thing as an I equal to 0 because if you are trying to build a business, it should have a certain investment. So what are the differences between the BC ratio and the profitability index? So number one, the formula. So BC ratio is B over 1 plus C hat. And then for profitability index, that is B minus C hat over I. So ang atong kuan for the benefit cost ratio, it is to see whether the benefits outweighs your cost. No? Ano siya. For profitability index, you are trying to quantify the value created per unit of investment. Okay? So for every unit of the investment na kay benefit minus the recurring cost, that is a portion na imuhang na return sa imuhang investment. So example, assume a 5-year program that will commit the government to the stream of real or constant dollar expenditures to generate a series of real benefits for a public project. Assume that I is 7%, N is 5, and K is 1. Compute for the profitability index of a 7% and determine whether it is worth funding the program. No, basically you have the same problem as the problem on the benefit cost analysis. So first and foremost, we need to compute for the B, I, and C. So, kana siya. Basically, that is your B refers to the all or the present worth of all the benefits, that is $77.44. Your I, therefore, is 10 plus $20 on the first year. Therefore, that is $28.69. There is your cash flow above. And then your C hat is equal to 18.78. So you may pause this video and try to compute whether or not the computations are correct. So knowing that you have the B, the I, and the C hat, we can already proceed to our formulation for the profitability. So B minus C hat is equal to 58.67. And your PI is equal to B minus C over I. Therefore, the value is 2.044. Therefore, if your PI is greater than 1, the project is worth undertaking. Next, the incremental profitability index. So if there is such a term as an incremental cost benefit analysis, there is also an incremental profitability index. So it is used in choosing the best profitability index from multiple exclusive projects. So the steps are most likely the same with the incremental BC ratio, but the only difference are the formulas because we need to get the B minus C hat over the I. So first, eliminate all alternatives with a PI of less than 1. Arrange the remaining alternatives in increasing the denominator. Compute for the incremental differences. After that, steps 4 and 5 are computing for the incremental profitability index. So there are modifications when it comes to this type of problem. Number one, if your AI or the change in I is equal to 0, you should choose the benefit or the alternative with a greater B minus C hat. Number two, In situations where projects with unusual service life are different, so you can actually compare it on a year, and we may compute all components valuing from B, I, and C on an annual basis and use the incremental analysis. Okay, the formula is most likely the same. So for example, we have 3 types of investment. So this is the same problem as the benefit cost ratio analysis. Therefore, you can see that you have 3 alternatives. You are provided already the BI and the C hat and the present worth of the values. So assuming that you have the same given as the benefit cost ratio, or the same alternative but different values, therefore your A1, your B is 12,000, I is 5,000, and C hat is 4,000. The present worth for that one is $3,000. So kung tanaw ka na, your profitability index is pinakadako kasi A1. So under the present worth criterion, katong sa present worth gyapon, the A2 would be selected. But under the PI analysis, A1 is the best when A2 is the least desired alternative. No? So step 1, eliminate alternatives with the PI ratio of less than 1. Since there are none, no elimination was done. Number 2, rank the I in an increasing order. So the in order would be A1, A3, and A2. Compute for the incremental differences. First, we'll have to compare the first two. So therefore, ang PI or A3 minus A1 or the incremental profitability index ratio is equal to 1.33. That would mean A3 is a better choice. So, incremental analysis on the succeeding one, since this is already an X, so we have to compare A2 and A3. So, comparing A2 and A3, it will give you an incremental profitability index ratio of 1.17. Therefore, A2 is a better choice. So, with no further alternatives, A2 is the best choice for this alternative. Okay, so heads up lang, for these types of problem is this does not necessarily always mean na ang last or ang last alternative maoy best, because at some point in this discussion there will be a changes when it comes to your given. So basically your solution would be very dependent on the provided given during your exams. So with that, we were able to discuss already the present worth, the annuity worth, and the future worth on our part 1. Okay? And then the BC ratio and profitability index is already discussed on this in this pre-recorded session. So I'll be providing you another pre-recorded session for the break-even point or the BEP analysis. Okay, that will be the part 3. And also kindly prepare for an activity every time we have a pre-recorded session, and hope I was able to clarify the topics at hand. Thank you.